Hello YouTube land, back in the attic, been a long old time, I hope you're well. I wanted to show you something which I think is really cool. So if you've been following me for a while, you'll know that I'm a guitar player, producer, all that stuff, musician, Quarantine Works, Top Drawer, whatever. What you may or may not know is that I've been working in music retail for a very long time. And also that I got my degree in industrial design from Brunel University many moons ago. So when something like this comes out, I cannot help but nerd out about it. This thing is wicked, let me tell you why. So, let me give you a little bit of background first, in case you don't know. So, Blackstar is a British company that makes Valve amps, guitar products. They've reached out into a few other things recently, but they always go with really forward-thinking ideas, lots of functionality, and they tend to lean towards the kind of home user a lot. So their HD range of amplifiers, for example, they've all got audio interfaces in them, but they're Valve amps, which is super cool. Now, one of the things about Valve amplifiers that all of us who love them know is that they can just be unholy in how loud they are. So when Blackstar came along and started making these smaller 1 watt, 5 watt, 20 watt versions of everything, they did sort of change the game a little bit, and even companies, you know, some of the bigger British companies that you might know of, like Marshall, things like that, started making smaller amplifiers that would help to sort of fill that market. Now, over the pandemic, this became so important. There were so many people who needed these things. I myself was using the Line 6 Helix stuff. All the Quarantine Works was done through that. But the problem that you run into with things like that is that you don't have any valve in it. And the valve has a particular feel and a particular kind of sound and crunch and all the other stuff that goes with it. So when Blackstar put out this pedal, which has the valve in it, I was super curious to give it a go. Now, this is actually the second iteration of this, and I played the first iteration when it came out years ago. Now the problem with those pedals, as great as they were, was they needed a 22 volt input. And I spent all my time working in a music shop trying to source new power supplies for people because they had a specific power supply and they would break. Now, it's very annoying, as you can imagine. So when they came out with this one, they've managed to make it a 9 volt, 500 milliamps input, which means it'll integrate into most pedal boards and you can just use it alongside your regular, you know, power block, whatever it might be. So I was super curious to give it a go because although it's running on 9 volts, it's actually still running 200 volts through the valve, which is where you get that saturation and that feel from, which is just a wicked bit of design, hence the nerding out. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the functions that go along with this, and hopefully you'll learn something and you'll see why I love it so much. So let's get down to the basic functionality of this thing. This particular one is an overdrive pedal. There is a black one as well, which is more of a distortion, and there is also a white one, which is a single channel booster, which you might put in front of something like this or your Valve amplifier, give you a bit more kick, a bit more life into your tone. Now, this one is probably the one that's the most all-round, which is why it's the one that I laid my hands on first. I'm in a fortunate position where I can borrow one of these, so I decided I was going to bring it home, make a little tune out of it, and just generally take it for a ride, see what it could do. Now, the song that I did at the beginning is all done just using the cab simulation from the side, which sounds great. There's 3 versions of that on a switch in the center. I believe I'm using the 112 that's in there, but there's also a 412 and a 212 depending on where you want to be. The really cool thing about this and the cab sim is that the architect software that you come download that comes along with this means that you can change what's in here. Now, it isn't actually an IR, as I initially thought it was. It's actually a simulation-based thing. So, although you've got a preamp valve in here, and this is going to respond like a valve, like a front end of an amplifier would, there is also power amp simulation in the back of it, and it will respond differently depending on what you ask it to do. You can also change whether or not it's 1 speaker, 2 speakers, 4 speakers, and that will create a different bass response, a different response overall, which makes it sound different. I prefer a slightly brighter tone, and I'm used to recording with a single speaker, so I've gone with that particular one. The idea behind this thing is that it could replace an amplifier on a pedal board. So instead of breaking your spine and having to carry around your heavy Valve amp, whatever it might be, you could put this onto your pedals and still get that feel. Now it's got a clean channel and a crunch channel on this side, which my understanding would be that you'd use the clean channel if you wanted to use this as an amp replacement. If you're using it as a distortion pedal or as an overdrive, you could click it over to crunch on one side and overdrive on the other. But as we stand, you've got two channels, clean and crunch and overdrive, and they've both got a gain and volume control. Then you have your master EQ in the middle, and then you have the ISF, which is the infinite shape feature, which is Blackstar's secret sauce. The idea behind this is that if you twist it one way, it's more American. If you twist it the other way, it's more British. Depending on who you ask, it's kind of a mid-sculpt situation. I hear it more like that. If you go more American, I think it's a little bit more scooped. If you go more British, it's slightly darker but chunkier. It's a cool sound. Now, the really cool thing about this is the amount of functionality that you have on it. You've got an input on this side, and you have the output on that side if you're going to use it as a distortion pedal or as a drive pedal. If you don't want to use it as that, and you just want to use it the way I have, you go in this side, and you come out the cab sim and into your interface, and you just leave the pedal be. And I think it sounds great doing that. If you wanted to, or say you wanted to get yourself a great guitar recording interface but didn't want to spend, you know, separate money on an interface and then the pedals and stuff, this has got one built in. So you can come straight out of the USB, put it on your desk, plug your guitar in, straight into your computer. Wicked. I can't see anything wrong with that at all. You can also come out the XLR if you want a balanced output. So let's say you're playing, I don't know, a wedding gig and your amp goes down. You just ask the sound guy, can I have another XLR please? Plug it in the desk, sound keeps going, party keeps rocking. So the other thing that I think is really cool about this is the fact that it's got a send and return in it. So if you're using this in place of an amplifier, then you just plug everything that would normally go in the back of your amp straight in there. Bob's your uncle. It just keeps going the way that it would normally be. So it might be your reverbs or your delays or your boost, whatever it is. But the cool thing about it is that it's after the valve, but it's before the pedal starts to simulate the power section. So it works in exactly the same way. So it doesn't matter if you come out the cab sim, the USB, or the XLR, it's still going to respond in the way that you would expect it to respond, like an amplifier would. But it's this big. Now, you may or may not notice, my amplifier's gone. At the start of the pandemic, I had to pay a bill. Heartbreaking. It's one of those things. And I haven't got a new amp yet. So when I look at something like this, that I can go and get on a train with, and go out and play a wedding or something like that, what's not to like? It's great, you know? And then using it at home, just to plug it in. As I say, everything I did was just, I've only got this thing for the weekend. I plugged it straight in, didn't really mess with it, just dialed up a tone that I liked and recorded a tune. And it's great. It really didn't take a lot. I didn't bother with the Architect software, for example. I've only got it for a couple of days, so I didn't want to do a deep dive into it. And I just think that these are absolutely excellent. And I'd really recommend getting one. If you're in the market for something that can just be used at home, so you can help scratch out a demo, or if you're just looking for something that will integrate easily into a pedal board and you can head off out and play anything from Glastonbury Festival to the Elm Tree in Beckenham, then this thing will do it. And I just think it's wicked, and I wanted to share that with you. Blackstar, great work, keep it coming. I've been a big fan of your work for a long time, and yeah, I'm gonna have to get myself one of these properly, I think. So thanks for tuning in. If you like this video, let me know what you thought. I'm thinking about doing a few more of these with stuff that I can, you know, borrow from places, if anything I can lay my hands on. And if there's something particular that you'd like me to mess around with, do some music with, let me know. I'll see what I can do. And see you next time. Thanks very much.